Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess, marketing exec by day, AI experimenter by day, night, and basically every other waking moment in between at this point.
And I'm Kyle, your resident tech guru. I've spent the last decade building data systems, products, and AI tools that solve real-world problems. My goal is to cut through the noise and show you how this tech actually works for your business. Each week, we'll break down AI concepts, tools, or trends that actually matter for your business. We'll explain what it is, why you should care, and how to use it without needing a computer science degree.
So whether you're a small business owner, an entrepreneur, or you're just tech curious, grab your coffee, close that tab where you've been staring at ChatGPT for the past 3 weeks wondering what to do with it, and let's dive in. Just think of us as your guides through the wild, wonderful, and sometimes completely overwhelming world of AI.
This is Early Adopter.
Welcome back to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess.
And I'm Kyle. Jess, how's your week been?
Well, Kyle, it's been quite the week for me. We've obviously had an amazing time talking to Sean over the last couple of weeks. Our technical setup has not had as good of a time talking to Sean, and we have had several technical meltdowns over the last couple of days. So it's actually a miracle that we got the podcast out this week at all. So we should give ourselves a pat on the back for getting that done, because it's been a nightmare is basically the only way to describe it.
That's all you. You've been basically the one powering through with grit and determination. So very appreciative of struggling through
Pure stubbornness, actually. I just get really stubborn.
So Jess, before we dive into today's show, though, I wanted to kind of talk about something really exciting that we realized this week. We need to celebrate something kind of monumental for the early adopter. This is episode 11, which means last week was our 10th episode. Can you believe we've been doing this for 10 episodes already?
I cannot believe we've been doing this for 10 episodes. I feel like I actually think that the technical meltdown distracted us from the fact that it was 10 episodes. Yeah. So yay, happy birthday to us. I can't believe that we forgot to mention it.
Happy birthday to us. It's so exciting that we made it.
We really did. It feels like just yesterday we were trying to figure out if anyone would actually want to listen to us nerding out about AI on a regular basis. And here we are 11 episodes in, and it sounds like people are interested in listening to us ramble on about AI every week. So this is very exciting.
It is exciting. And I have been really positive, and I've really enjoyed just getting all the feedback from the listeners. I'm pleasantly surprised at how much people are listening in. So appreciate and thank you to all of the audience for continuing to, chime in and check us out every week. And for those of you who are new, go back and look at the stuff we've already done. We've covered tons of topics from
so many.
Breaking down basic LLM concepts, diving deep into prompt engineering. Today we're tackling a really important topic, for any business using AI, which is policy frameworks.
Yep, that's right. We are once again joined this week by Sean Bhardwaj from Breakthrough Growth Partners, if I can speak properly. For the final part of our 3-part series with Sean, we initially anticipated this being 1 part, and here we are 3 episodes in. So again, thank you, Sean. But if you've missed the first 2 episodes on that, definitely go back and listen. We covered why AI transformation is happening so fast, the 5 major pitfalls that will kill any AI initiative, which is incredibly important. And then Sean's brilliant proficiency before efficiency concept, which is probably one of my favorite quotes from the entire series.
Definitely going on a t-shirt alongside the Rogue Intern.
So many t-shirts have come from this series.
Don't worry, the early adopter merch store is
coming. It's coming.
Yeah,
if I'm the only one who's going to wear it, you and I are going to be the only ones wearing it, and I will wear it proudly.
Well, we've got to be on brand in this in the episode. So
repping the brand, exactly.
But today, we're getting into the practical stuff. So actually creating that AI policy framework that every business needs, no matter what size your team or organization is. And this isn't about restricting AI use. It's about creating guardrails that let you use AI confidently and effectively.
And trust me, after some of the stories that we've covered in the last 10 episodes on the AI gone wrong segments, I'm particularly looking at that Grok story from a couple of weeks ago. You're definitely going to want those guardrails in place. They are very, very, very important for AI usage.
Totally. So we're about to hop in, but I do want to mention, what I kind of teased there a little bit. This week, Jess and I are going to be trying out the new ChatGPT agent feature. We're going to be mixing it up a little. We said we'd report back on it, but I think we're actually going to feature it for a full week and give you a really in-depth report. I think this is going to be a really good real-world test. We want to see if these agents actually live up to the hype for day-to-day business tasks. And this might be a really great way for us all to get started about that. So we're going to do a deep dive next week about that.
Totally. Right. So let's dive in with Sean and get into the nitty gritty of building AI policies that actually work for businesses of all sizes. Let's get into it.
Today, we're bringing you the final part of our 3-part series with Sean Bhardwaj from Breakthrough Growth Partners. Sean, welcome back. So great to have you again. And why don't you remind our listeners a bit about yourself before we get into it?
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I'm Sean Bhardwaj, the managing partner at Breakthrough Growth Partners, where we help organizations and communities embrace innovation and grow into the future, especially when it comes to AI and emerging tech. I'm excited to keep the conversation going.
I'm excited to finally dive into what we've been building towards, which is actually creating that AI policy framework. It feels like we've been building up to this for ages now. But if you missed the first 2 episodes with Sean, definitely go back and listen because we've covered a lot of ground. In part 1, we explored why AI transformation is happening so fast and why it's so different from previous shifts that we've seen in tech. We introduced Sean's brilliant concept of proficiency before efficiency. And we dove deep into the reality of shadow AI that's happening in your businesses.
Then in part 2, we got into the real reasons why AI initiatives fail. Spoiler alert, it's not because the technology doesn't work. But Sean walked us through the 5 major pitfalls that trip up businesses, from misaligned goals and weak leadership support, to poor data foundations, something I really resonate with, ethical gaps, and then underdeveloped skills and culture.
Yeah, and throughout both episodes, we kept coming back to one central theme. You need structure, you need strategy, and you need to start with what I like to call a minimum viable AI policy. So whether you have a team of 2, 20, 200, whether you're just getting started with AI or you're already knee-deep in experimenting, this episode is going to give you the practical framework you need to do to start off right. Let's dive in.
I think we're ready to start talking about some AI policy essentials. How can people, get started with this?
Yeah, so let's come back to that intern metaphor we've been using, right? If you had a brand new intern or employee on the first day, would you give them, your company credit card, unlimited access to any place in your company, all the customer data, and the ability to speak publicly on behalf of your brand on day one, right? Hopefully not. And if you do, tell me.
I think we know, Sean, you're the rogue intern. I think we know that you wouldn't be given that access to everything.
Going back to your example.
Yes. Been there, done that. Fun was had by
literally got the t-shirt. So
I mean, it sounds absurd, right? Of course you wouldn't. That's just ridiculous. You would onboard them. You would set expectations. You would give them a framework and a space to work within. And that's kind of what many businesses are doing. The opposite of that actually is what many businesses are doing with their AI tools today. So we talked about, the shadow AI use. In the absence of information, everyone makes their own story. And I think that's one of the things that I don't like about sort of legacy leadership, where it's all about guarding your experience and guarding your knowledge and controlling information. We live in an open information transparent environment. So you can't operate in the same way. And if people don't understand what's happening, they're going to make up their own narrative. They're not going to just say, I trust that everything's fine. They're going to say, something bad is happening, and I think it's X. So what we need to do is to create clear guardrails, shared understanding of what's okay, what's risky. And that way, everyone isn't responsible for figuring it out on their own or quietly experimenting, or sharing what they've learned, or maybe not sharing what they've learned, and having all this apprehension around it, because it is what everyone is thinking about. It's on all of our minds, and not getting it out into the open and being clear about it is causing and will cause way more harm than anything else.
I love the intern analogy. We use it all the time. It's so true. You would never give an intern that level of access on day one. But we're basically doing that with a lot of our AI tools today. And we talk about that shadow usage, especially if you're putting a lot of proprietary information into these AI tools. I mean, you're giving a lot of important information away. So I have to ask, is the goal to eventually give AI more autonomy, or should we always thinking of it as needing supervision?
I try not to go with like always and never. Only a Sith deals in absolutes. So the reality is
exactly what popped in my head when you said that. Thank you for saying that. Let our nerd flags fly a little bit here. Love it.
Yes. So I think I try to focus on where we are now and how that sets us up for the future, right? So like now and next, not always future. Future is good for vision, but not for practicality. So the reality is AI norms are still being formed. And let's focus on the people part of it just for one more second, which is, in Slack's workforce participation survey at the earlier part of this year, in one survey, they found that over 70%, it was like 76% of employees feel the pressure to become AI experts, whatever the heck that means. But only 7% actually consider themselves proficient. And nearly half say they're uncomfortable admitting when they use AI at work. So it's one thing to say, and we've kind of harped on this ad nauseum of like why the business needs to manage when AI is put externally, right? Like what are the guardrails? How are we using it? How will it impact our customers and our stakeholders? But on the internal side, we need to give it that same care and supervision. So I would say, yes, for now, do not plan to have AI automate anything that you think is high value or high risk. At the same time, give your team the room to play and experiment and give them the training and support they need to do it. Because very soon, and like, I don't know if that's 2 years or 5 years or whatever it is, the tools will continue to improve and they will be able to be autonomous in a way that is like de-risked for your business. So we're gearing up for what's coming now. We're trying to get the utility now, but gearing up for what's coming next.
Those stats are wild. 70% feel pressure to become AI experts, but only 7% consider themselves to be proficient. And half are uncomfortable admitting that they use AI at work. And this just sounds like a recipe for people either avoiding AI entirely or using it incorrectly or using it in secret, which is definitely something that we've been seeing.
That secrecy piece is really dangerous. If people are experimenting with AI in the shadows, that's exactly when you get into trouble with data privacy or brand issues.
I think we need to trademark this this shadow AI phrase because I feel like we're the only ones using it.
Without getting
so. Like
licensing, like shadow AI, like the way to the dark side, that path leads or something. And this is why. Second, what's that path?
No, go ahead. I was just saying, I love it. Yeah.
We have a whole early t-shirt line, coming soon.
Exactly.
So I think what organizations need, right? Like, so how do we solve this problem? Like, we've kind of gone down, a downward path, if you will. I think it can be solved initially, especially for smaller organizations, with just a lightweight, what I like to call it a minimum viable AI policy. I'm not saying you should, create this in a vacuum. Like if you have access to like lawyers and HRs and tech people and all those folks, like by all means, use them, engage them, right? Like help them give you real advice. I am not a lawyer, nor have I ever been a lawyer, nor will I ever be a lawyer. But I think if you have that one-page document or a few pages that just answer a few key questions to set expectations, build trust, and encourage adoption, you can reduce a lot of that risk. Okay, so we don't need, a very sophisticated first version, but what we need to do is to make 4 things clear. So the first is, where are we using AI and why are we using AI? This is answering questions like, what business problems are we using it to solve? What's in bounds and what's out of scope? Is the use aligned with our brands, our value, and customer promise? And really, as I'm talking about this, the folks now will be like, Sean, you're talking about an AI strategy, which is, yes, that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. But it's having that conversation, right? And doing that strategic planning to know how it ties into your business. That's probably a whole big topic we could spend a lot of time on. But the point for this section is to make sure that if you don't know why you're using AI, your teams and your employees will not either. And the results are going to reflect that. So then the next question that we want to answer with our AI policy is, how are we using it, right? Which tools are approved? Are we using free tools? Are we using paid tools? Do we have business accounts? Very basic types of things, but very logistical and important things, because what you don't want to do is to have an approval of ChatGPT and then someone accidentally logs in or creates a personal account and then they take your company data and put it in their personal account. That's going to create a whole lot of problems and issues for you. And then, as we've been talking about, which outputs and do the outputs require human review before being shared externally? Do we have a policy around how we mention our use of AI, right? Like, you've got your cookie policy and your privacy policy, like thinking about externally, how do you want to communicate this as well? And this document can help you do that in this section, right? Thinking about how you're going to be using it. The third piece to this is who can use AI and for what, right? So you may not initially want to roll out AI to every part of your team and every group and everyone has free play. It may be certain uses, certain employees that can use it for content generation, or others can use it for analysis. Where do we allow it to make versus inform decisions? So I would say informing decisions is good, making is not so good, but everyone has their own discretion. So like, can we use this for sensitive things like making hiring decisions? Can we use it for performance reviews? How can we use it for those specific use cases? And again, where's human oversight required, right? Like, what needs to be filtered? What's the checkpoints and the checks and balances on this? And last but not least is, what happens when things go wrong? Not if, when, because we have risk plans for everything, right? Like, you have sprinklers in your office building because it may get set on fire. Most of us will never experience that, thankfully, but because it's there, we've mitigated that risk. So how are we going to handle hallucinations or errors? How do we notify internally or externally if something problematic is generated or sent? What's our process for dealing with that? What's the process for improving our use, flagging risky tools or behavior? And so again, mistakes are going to happen, but the question is, what's the way that we're going to catch them and course correct as opposed to avoid them? And the last piece I'll say with this policy, I know there's a lot of information that they're out there, is it has to work for now and make a commitment, maybe put it into your AI tool and have it remind you or, ask you for updates 6 months from now. And I would say 6 months, not 12, because things are going to change quite a bit in that time frame, right? With the iteration we've talked about. But like, it has to be useful today. And it's okay if the answer is going to be different in a while. That's all right. We don't need to have analysis paralysis and figure it out for the end of all time.
I was just going to ask that, Sean. That's a great thing to point out, that you should be revisiting and updating your policy probably every 6 months, if not, more frequently. I think all of these questions are great. And I think my advice on this would be, you probably need to be a little bit more open to all of your employees to use tools. Back to our stats in last episode, if people are not being treated equally and all getting access to these tools, you may only give your, pro business account ChatGPT to 5 people because you want them to focus on what they're doing for that use case. Your other employees are probably going to start using their personal accounts. So, you might want to try to, your inclination might be to lock it down and only allow it for certain people. Unfortunately, I think people are going to start using banned tools or their personal accounts. If you do that, you need to kind of probably think a little bit broader and think about how all of your employees can use, AI with business accounts, but still have those guardrails around what they can and can't do with it.
And for the what happens when things go wrong piece, like, can you give us an example of what that process might look like? Like, if someone accidentally sends out a marketing email with AI generated content that has errors, what's the response in that?
Yeah, I mean, luckily, I think there's smarter folks than I on like reputation and brand management, but I think owning it is good, right? Like, the culture of transparency is generally applicable. And I think that there's still this legacy playbook where people think like everything needs to be buttoned up and polished and I can't make any mistakes. And if I make a mistake with my customer, like, that's it. Tomorrow my business implodes. And there's plenty of examples where that's absolutely not the case. And I think what I would recommend and what I have recommended to folks is like, just own it, right? Set it up and say, hey, we tried this new thing. Whoops, like we did get this wrong. Here's the right thing. We want to own it and correct it. But like, we're trying to do it for this reason. And that way, having that policy also explains it to other people and allows your customers to engage with you. I'll have to remember which organizational behavior or kind of behavioral consultant it was, but I think there was a study done that said, they looked at 3 groups of people with stays in hotels, and they said group A went to the hotel and nothing went wrong. Group B went to the hotel and like something was wrong, but like it was fixed. And then group C, something went wrong and it wasn't fixed. Who was more likely to return to the hotel? Like who had better brand sentiment and affinity after that? I think most people would say, well, if everything went perfect, that group would be the one that's most likely to return. But it's actually group
the
B.
one where it was fixed.
The one where it was fixed, because then it's like a trust test, right? It's like this thing broke and this is how they responded. And now I know how they're going to do. Like, this is a company that will own their mistakes. This is a company that will communicate clearly. This is a company that cares about how their decisions impact me, right? Like, it can be a good thing.
I've had that happen. I've 100% done that myself. So
Yeah.
I get it.
I think that's a great lesson. How you fix it, how you basically respond to it is so important. It might be a real opportunity for your business as well.
Yes. And I think this matters more, right? Especially for smaller or more resource-strapped organizations and teams, because working with big companies, like we have compliance teams and in-house counsel and like lots of people that can look at it and manage the risk in a lot of these angles. But smaller organizations don't, but that's why having a policy matters even more, because then you have a baseline you're operating from, right? And you can change that baseline over time. But instead of figuring out what the heck do we do and why are we doing all those questions later, you had that up front. And so that enables you and your small team to make quick decisions, even if you're wearing multiple hats. Giving them that simple policy like takes that pressure off and builds shared confidence. And like if you're using AI to interact with customers, whatever that form it takes, or whether it's writing the emails or drafting proposals, this is a reputational issue, right? Not just a workflow one. So again, analogies, because we love them, like a good policy is like a lane marker on the road. It's not about stopping where you could go. It's about telling you how not to drift into danger. And it lets everyone else drive faster and more safely because the boundaries and the rules are clear.
Sean, we've covered a lot. We've given our audience a ton to think about, frameworks, analogies. Let's bring it all home for them.
Yeah. So here's where we landed, across our entire conversation, right? We've seen this movie before. New technology arrives, people focus on speed and savings and efficiency, and then realize the real power is in reinventing what's possible by focusing on quality and making things better. Generative AI is no different. The tools are already here. The shift is already happening, but it's not just about experimenting with it. It's about having a system, a strategy, and most importantly, the skills in place to use it well. So if you take nothing else away, take this, like AI is not a shortcut to greatness, but it can be a multiplier of what you're already doing well if you give it the direction, structure, and the thoughtful leadership it needs.
Sean, this has been amazing. Like, I really can't thank you enough for joining us on the pod. It's really just been such an interesting conversation. And for our audience, if you feel like AI adoption is harder than it should be, you're not alone. I think Sean has really driven home that most failures aren't about the technology. They're about the foundation or lack thereof. And, whether you're a small business owner, a consultant, or someone who's actually leading a team, the key insight here is that you don't need to be an AI expert to avoid these pitfalls. You just need to be intentional about how you approach it.
So Sean, as we wrap up this series, I keep coming back to something you said in episode 1, that we're still all figuring this out together. And that feels, I think, really important for people to hear.
Yeah, it really is. I think there's just so much pressure to have it all figured out. And you see it in your feeds every day, and there's always some new iteration, a new model, and lots of people trying to put your attention on AI. But the truth is that even the companies that seem to be winning are still experimenting and learning as they go. One of the little axioms I like to remember is, the early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese.
So Sean, we're going to come away with so many new little catchphrases and t-shirts.
And t-shirts.
But That's what I really love about this approach that we've outlined, because it's not about having perfect policies from day one. It's about having the framework that lets you iterate and improve as you learn.
Exactly. And that's why the minimum viable policy we talked about today, answering those core questions about where, who, how, and what happens when things go right and when things go wrong, that's the starting point, not the finish line.
Absolutely. For our listeners who are thinking, okay, this all makes sense, but I still don't know where to start with my specific situation, and of course, we want to make sure we give them the actionable steps to start doing something today, what would you tell them?
Yeah, it's a conversation I love having, and I know all of us love having. So first, stay tuned to early adopter. But second, every business is different. And while the frameworks are the same, how you apply it really depends on your team size, your industry, where you're applying it, your current tech setup, all of that context matters.
And you're offering to have these conversations with our listeners, right?
Yes, absolutely. Been having some great conversations. And for early adopter listeners, I'm doing a complimentary 30-minute strategy session. Just mention the podcast when you reach out and we can talk through your specific situation. Maybe you're dealing with that shadow AI problem we discussed, or you want to implement something or just try some things out. You're not sure about the risks, or you want to roll this out to your team. So whatever's keeping you up at night, we can talk about it.
That's incredible. Love that. And really appreciate you offering that to the listeners. But where should people find you, Sean?
Yeah, easiest is probably the website, breakthroughgrow.com, or just email me directly at sean@breakthroughgrow.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn if that's easier.
Sean, this has been such a valuable series for us. Thank you so much again for joining us. What are your final thoughts for business owners or founders who are still on the fence about taking AI seriously?
Yeah, I would say it's almost like the earth under the fence is moving. So, your position is not staying the same. And doing nothing is actually a choice, right? So you're always making decisions in your business. But doing nothing is becoming a riskier choice every day, every week, and certainly every month. But the good news is you don't have to revolutionize everything overnight. You can start with that policy framework, pick one workflow to improve, and then just build from there. The businesses, again, that are the most successful with AI aren't the ones with the fanciest tools. They're the ones who approach it the most thoughtfully.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. Sean, this has been such a great series. I really enjoyed your partnership. I can't wait to have you on here again. This series has really been less about the technology and more about the mindset and the process. And so I feel it's like very simpatico and such a great addition to what we're trying to teach and talk about here. So love when you start talking about getting that foundation right first. I think that's so important for our audience to do.
And before we let Sean go, I have to ask, will we see you back here on the podcast again in the future?
I hope so. I love what we're doing here. And as the space evolves, I know there'll be a lot more to discuss. So if you and your audience would be happy to have me back, I would love to be here.
Well, I'm in. I definitely want to have you
Me
back.
too.
So, please reach out to Sean and, get started on your AI policy today.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. And just a reminder for everyone, you don't have to figure this out alone.
Let's kick off our news segment with some big moves in the AI world. Amazon just made a quiet but significant move into wearable AI by acquiring Bee, just like the bumblebee. A signal, I think, that ambient, always-on AI might be the next big platform shift after smart speakers and other technology. And you also might remember that OpenAI recently bought a wearable device company as well. So this is another sign that the market might be heading in that direction.
Yeah, this is not the first time that we've seen AI wearables have popped up in the last couple of years. There was one called Humane a couple of years ago. There was one called the Rabbit as well. They kind of crashed and burned. But what's a little bit different about Bee is that it makes a $50 wearable device. So it kind of looks like a Fitbit. It constantly listens to everything that you say throughout the day. So there's probably going to be some privacy concerns built into that as well, which they're going to have to address. But it also transcribes conversations. It creates summaries, generates to-do lists, and it acts as a personal AI assistant.
Yeah, it sounds a little dystopian, but here's the strategic play that I think matters. This isn't just about listening in, it's about ambient AI. tools that fade into the background and quietly reshape how you do your own.
Yeah. So like imagine never missing a follow-up again because your AI assistant heard you promise to send that proposal by Friday, or having automatic meeting notes for every conversation you have, whether it's, a formal meeting or just a casual chat with a client. For people who are juggling a lot of priorities, this could be really useful. I know that that is something that, could have really come in handy when I was in Cannes for the Lions, because you have so many conversations over so many days, you just can't remember every single thing that you said. So I can see the appeal of this. I think there are concerns, but I can definitely see the appeal.
Totally. I feel the same way when I've been attending conferences. You have all these great conversations and there's so much ideation that happens very organically throughout these conversations, because you're just kind of in that headspace where you're thinking about new ideas. And so a lot comes up. And of course, there's always that little tidbit where you're like, oh, I would love to follow up with someone. This would be a great time to have that. And I think, Jess, we've looked at some other wearables like Plod, which could potentially do something like this. But you need to think about not just the $50 cost, but also like what is the AI transcribe cost. So there's a lot more that goes into this.
Yeah, definitely. It's always the subscription fees, right? It's the same with the Fitbit or, with any of these.
Yep. But here's where I think it gets interesting from a business strategy perspective. So Amazon's acquisition signals that the big tech companies see wearable AI as the next major platform. I think we see this with OpenAI. They've even come out and said, we want to be, your AI operating system, which means, they want to encompass everything. When we've seen this playbook before. So it's not like it's necessarily new or revolutionary. First, it was smartphones, then smart speakers, now wearables that are always going to be with you.
Yeah. And, unlike some of the other AI wearables that we've seen, because this is a much more affordable price point, that makes it much more accessible to anyone who actually wants to experiment without breaking the bank. Like you can put $50 towards something where even, an Apple Watch at, I don't know, they can be hundreds and hundreds of dollars. That's a barrier to entry, where this is much, much, much more accessible.
The privacy questions around this are quite legitimate, though. I remember this was a big issue around Google Glass quite a few years ago.
It's still an issue it's still an issue with Meta's AR glasses, whatever, I can't even remember what they called, but that was I was having that conversation at Cannes actually, because Meta had a demo of the glasses, and it's very hard to tell when they are recording. And so there's a real like consent issue as well. And I think this is going to be a similar situation.
Yeah, or just an etiquette issue. I mean, when you hop on a Zoom call, it's polite, if not ethical, to say, oh, can I record this conversation? We all have these note taker apps, but it's really important that like you have that conversation with the person on the other side. So now B claims they only store transcripts, not audio, and that you can set filters by location or topic. But now that Amazon owns it, those rules could change overnight and you wouldn't really have much say. So that's a big concern.
And we know what Amazon can be like with some of these things. They now, I believe it was announced that Alexa does record all conversations now. I think it was one of those like things that everyone kind of assumed were going on, but I think it is like official now that they record in the background, even when you're not engaging with Alexa. So, Amazon aren't necessarily the most ethical about this. So, that's just something to bear in mind. But actually, this is exactly where Sean's policy framework from our chat with him becomes really relevant. Because if you're considering tools like this for your business, you need really clear guidelines about what data you're comfortable sharing, how it gets used, what happens if that policy changes, like all those things you were just talking about with, with Google Glass and with the Meta glasses. Like that's where these sorts of guidelines are designed to protect you and to give some, guidance for how you and your team can use these sorts of tools.
Absolutely. Okay, now shifting gears for our second AI story of the week. This is more policy-driven news. The White House just dropped its AI action plan. It's 90 points of ambition to make the U.S. the global leader in AI.
Yeah, so like with the EU AI Act that we discussed a couple of weeks ago, this plan potentially has real implications for our audience, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to cover it, like not to get too deep into politics, but it is actually quite relevant for this audience. So it's broken into 3 pillars. which are accelerate AI innovation, build American AI infrastructure, and lead in international AI diplomacy.
Mm-hmm. The innovation piece is huge for founders and entrepreneurs that are here. The innovation pillar is aimed at speed, so less red tape, more support for open source AI, and a strong focus on free speech, interestingly. That's great for founders.
I feel like we know who put that particular bullet point in that list.
But it is great for founders that want to build fast. But as Sean said, speed without strategy isn't innovation, it's risk.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest concern with this, is that the tech companies want those guardrails removed because it kind of gives them carte blanche to do anything. But as Sean said, that's where the risk really, really comes into it. And, that's what we saw with the Grok meltdown the other week.
Some guardrails are built for actually the protection of the consumer, and we need to make sure that those continue to exist.
100%. I also feel like this is really going to butt up against the EU AI Act. So it's going to be interesting to see how those two things coexist is probably the right word for it. But the infrastructure part is actually really interesting. The plan acknowledges that AI is an energy hog, which we have talked about extensively, and that America's power grid hasn't grown much since the 1970s, which I know is a pretty major issue kind of in general. So they're talking about massive grid expansion, bringing chip production back to US soil, which we'll see how NVIDIA feels about that, and streamlined permitting for data centers.
Yeah. And why this isn't just abstract, policy, I really think it can affect how fast and affordable AI becomes for all of us. Better infrastructure means faster tools, lower costs, more providers to choose from, hopefully, although, there is some concern that this might end up just in the hands of the big players, as we've talked about. But crucially, smarter energy use. AI is a power-hungry beast. And if we don't modernize the grid alongside it, we do risk massive environmental costs and energy bottlenecks down the line.
I think one of my many concerns about this is the lack of regulation means that it's actually going to be even more of an environmental disaster, but we'll see how that plays out. But the focus on open source AI is really interesting because instead of being locked into one company's ecosystem, which is obviously something that we have raised concerns about, and actually Sean raised concerns about as well, this means that businesses could have more choice and flexibility in the AI tools they use, which is never a bad thing. As we've often said, it just gives you the opportunity to vote with your dollar a little bit more than you might have otherwise.
I think that point is so key, voting with your dollar. I think that's going to be important with the environmental impacts and energy usage. I think it's very true with this open source component. We're already seeing a lot of these tools that entered the market really quickly, like Cursor and Lovable, that were very cheap and are now starting to change the way that they price things to include credit usage, which is all about improving your costs. So they've done what typical businesses do. They've captured kind of first mover advantage at a very low price to capture market share. And now the price is starting to creep up. Open source technologies and supporting those should help counter a lot of that and allow this really great technology to stay reasonable and affordable for all of us so we're not locked out. I also think this sets the stage for American startups to potentially lead the global AI wave. With potential export opportunities and strategic relevance. There's a lot of competition in the world around AI, and whoever is leading that strategy, could potentially be leading global policy in the years to come.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is that this plan just really suggests that AI development is going to accelerate, not slow down, which is one of the reasons why we've done this podcast in the first place, to prepare everyone for kind of what's coming down the pipeline, because businesses that start building AI literacy and implementing smart policies are now going to be in a much better position to take advantage of whatever comes next. Okay, so it is time for everyone's favorite cautionary segment, AI Gone Wrong. And Kyle, this week's story is a perfect example of why Sean's policy framework isn't just a nice to have. It's absolutely essential.
100%. Right. I love that it just seems to have happened at exactly the right time for us to talk about
It really did.
this.
It's almost like he did it intentionally.
Yep, the universe
The universe was
has spoken for
talking to us. Exactly.
So this story comes from the world of vibe coding. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term vibe coding, it's where you let AI write your code instead of doing it manually. You know, we were just talking about those tools like Cursor and Lovable and Replit. It's
Replit.
fast, it's easy, and as we're about to find out, sometimes quite risky. Now, Jess, I know you love a bit of vibe coding on the weekends.
I do love vibe coding. I am very much the definition of vibe coding because I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to like actually know what I'm doing. So I can look at something and understand. It's like speaking a foreign language, right? Because that is essentially what coding is. It's learning different languages. And it's like being able to read a language and kind of understanding like 50% of it, but I definitely couldn't speak the language fluently, but I can look at something and I can understand the gist of it. So that's the best way to describe it. But I will also caveat that everything that I build is for internal usage or for my own usage, and nothing major happens if it goes sideways. It doesn't matter if something breaks because all that it's going to do is just it's going to slightly annoy me because I'm going to have to do something manually. Like nothing that I am working on is of that great importance. So that is the difference with my vibe coding and this story that we're about to get into.
Well, unfortunately, that wasn't so true for this example. Jason Lemkin, the founder of SaaStr, learned the hard way that this convenience and safety that comes with vibe coding doesn't always mix.
No, so Jason was using a tool called Replit, which both you and I have used. And he was using Replit to build a database application. And so for context, this wasn't like some throwaway side project. This was live production data. So real business information that covered 1,200 executives and nearly 1,200 companies. So this is real business data that his company depends on. And there's a real cautionary tale here.
Yeah, here's where it gets wild. Jason told the AI, and supposedly, literally in all caps, no more changes without explicit permission. And when you're developing software, this is what developers would call a code freeze. It literally means don't touch anything.
And what did that AI do? It completely ignored those instructions and deleted his entire production database, not the backup, not a test version, the live production database with months of work and critical business data, all of those executives, companies, everything that his company depended on. Now, we can talk about that in a minute because that's that is rule number one.
And as Jess knows, in the businesses that we worked in together, you know, I was always called Shiva, the destroyer of worlds, because I was very likely
I
to
forgot
destroy.
You did that. You did that once, didn't you?
I have been known to destroy databases, but to be fair, never a production database.
No, and that's the biggest difference. And that is why you do dev and staging
because rightly so, I, as the developer pushing things, was not allowed. I wasn't given those rights to be able to touch the production database in that way, right? And in going forward in all, you know, iterations of businesses I've been in, I always say, don't give me that. I don't want that responsibility. Don't give me that.
That is the ultimate responsibility as an engineer. That is like, or a dev, that's like the number one.
You don't want
You're like God. You are God at that point.
You don't want with great power comes great responsibility.
So exactly. No.
Yeah. So, but when Jason confronted the AI about what happened, the response was almost human-like in how apologetic it was. You know, it was like, I saw empty database clear. It basically just started backtracking around excuses. I panicked instead of thinking. I destroyed months of of your work. I'm so sorry. It even rated its own mistake as a 95 out of 100 in terms of severity. Although, you know, if I was in that place, I would go 99, right?
I would say 99.9, yeah. But here's where it gets even worse. The AI then told Jason that the database couldn't be restored, all versions were destroyed, and that there was no way to roll back the changes. Jason thought that he had lost everything, like his literal life's work gone because an AI panicked. There was also a cautionary tale in that, but that's another story.
Yeah, and also this wasn't true. The AI was wrong, or worse, misleading. When Jason ran the rollback anyway, despite what the AI was saying, it actually worked. So all of this data came back. But for a terrifying period, the AI had convinced him that his business data was permanently destroyed, even though it wasn't.
So this story hits on so many of the issues that Sean talked about in our chat with him. So first of all, there were no proper guardrails between development and production environments. Like, even I, as a non-developer, as someone who has been around this, knows that is just rule number one. And actually, this guy should have known better. Like, it doesn't excuse what the AI did, but also he should have known better.
Yeah.
But anyway, a testing.
Have a basically delineation between your production and your staging environment always.
Exactly. Because like, nothing should ever have access to live business data, period. Like, in any of the projects that I ever worked on across my entire career, if we had done that for any of the multinational businesses that we had worked on, like, when I think about the levels of checks and confirmations that we did before we were ever allowed to touch the actual live data, like, it's actually mind-boggling that he even allowed this to happen in the first place. But.
And it wouldn't pass any rigor around SOC compliance. So if you're a business and you're working towards working with larger enterprises and you're going to have to be compliant, I mean, this would never. My prior chief compliance officer, she would be losing it right now. I mean, it would just never even happen. But the second big issue here is there was no human oversight for these critical operations. Database deletions should require multiple confirmations and human approval, especially in a production environment. And I think, we talk about this vibe coding. It's really important that I think for the vibe coding, you consider it a prototyping tool. Something if you want to test demand out very quickly and, get a new feature up, something like that. But it should never be a long-term strategy.
And third, there was no clear incident response plan. So when things actually went wrong, Jason didn't know who to contact, what the rollback procedures were, or even what was actually possible. So, it's not like you can just send a message to your customer chatbot and say, hey, I accidentally deleted my entire production database. Like, this is kind of a little bit bigger than that.
Yeah, and maybe it's a cautionary tale about what tools you use. The CEO of Replit came out and responded quickly and called the incident unacceptable and should never be possible. They've since implemented automatic separation between dev and production databases and added better rollback features. But at the same time, you don't really have much of a path with a lot of these tools where you're vibe coding. There's not like a big customer support function that's going to allow you to change these mistakes. So you might want to think about what are the support features that are around these tools when you pick them, so that if something does go wrong, you have a path to a human or some sort of, fix that can quickly affect you, especially, even though it shouldn't be, especially if it's on production data.
Yeah. But, here's the thing, right? Like, this is obviously a story about AI gone wrong. That's why we're featuring it in this segment. But this is also a story about what happens when you don't have clear policies and safeguards in place. Like, the AI was working as designed. Yeah, it kind of went a little bit rogue, but the problem is that the design allowed it to do things that it should have never been able to do. He should have never been working with live data. He should have never been, we've talked about this a lot. When you're vibe coding these sorts of things, or when you're building your first agent, or whenever you're doing anything like this, you start with something small, something internal that it's not going to matter if it blows up in your face. And that is, I think, also, part of this whole situation as well.
Yeah, so for anyone who is interested in vibe coding, definitely do a little research on how, software development goes through these processes, because this is a standard. You would never have this happen in, traditional software development processes. You build the code, you QA it, you push it to production, version control, etc. So for vibe coding, the same policies need to exist. What you can and can't do, proper separation between development and production environments. And proper recovery procedures.
Yeah. But also, this is, what makes it particularly relevant for our audience is that Jason's pretty tech savvy. Although, actually, I would really argue against that, because if he's that tech savvy, he should know some of these basic structures. But anyway,
I
But
think
this means
not
that
to not to throw shade, because I think there might be a lot of tools out there in the market nowadays that that could have this issue. So I think more prevalent than we realize.
technically on paper, Jason is an entrepreneur, a tech savvy entrepreneur. So if it can happen to someone with his background, it kind of means it can happen to anyone. I mean, the good news is that Sean's minimum viable AI policy that we've talked about today definitely addresses exactly these sorts of scenarios. And this is exactly the sort of thing that his MVP is designed to address. So there are ways to prevent this from happening.
Yeah. Yeah. The message isn't don't use AI. Again, I think we talk about often, use it wisely with real guardrails. It can be incredibly powerful, but when it goes wrong without those proper safeguards, it can be pretty catastrophic to your business.
Absolutely. Speaking of safeguards, let's talk about some quick wins that you can implement right now to protect your business from something like this happening to you.
Spot on. Let's bring this policy top down to earth. There are 3 things you can do this week to protect your business and get ahead.
So quick win number 1 is to create your AI boundaries document. And this doesn't need to be fancy. You don't need to, talk to lawyers about this. It's just a very simple 1-page document that answers 4 questions. What tools are we using? What are they allowed to access? Who can use them? And what requires human approval before it goes live? It can just be that simple. And actually something as simple as that probably would have helped to prevent something like the Replit disaster from happening.
Yep. I mean, think of it like onboarding a new employee. You're not going to hand them your company credit card on day 1. So don't give AI free reign over your business systems either. Set the rules, define what's off limits, and what needs explicit approval.
Quick win number 2, implement the production firewall. Never, ever, if you are vibe coding, let AI tools access live business data directly. So whether it's your customer database, your financial records, your website backend, anything that could directly affect your customers or anything like that, create a copy for the AI to work with it first. Test everything in a sandbox environment before you do anything, even thinking about the live business data.
This would have saved, the Replit disaster. If the AI had been playing in a sandbox, it might have messed up, but it wouldn't have destroyed the live version. Jason would have learned about the problem without losing any real data, and we wouldn't have heard about the story.
Well, it certainly wouldn't have given us something to talk about. Quick win number 3, establish your human override protocol. So for anything customer facing, financially important, or brand critical, create a rule that a human has to review it before it goes out into the world. This includes AI generated emails, social media posts, or any content that represents your business. I think this is actually not too dissimilar to, we always talk about the intern, but like from my days in PR, like we would never let an intern send out an email that would have gone to our entire list of journalists. In fact, I can remember times when that did slip through the net and things went horribly wrong. So you just have to think of it that way. It's not any different than something that you've already done before working with junior team members. You're just implementing it for the AI first.
I think this is a concept we're going to talk about. Potentially we're entering into a little bit of trough of disillusionment with AI, where we've expected AI to just do everything for us, when in actuality, it's more about, again, optimizing your own productivity, helping you do what you've been doing all along a lot faster. So remember, that human oversight is to make sure that you're doing things faster, but not, it's not without you. So the key is to make this a real process, not just a nice idea. Assign someone to review specific types of AI output. Make it part of your workflows. Own the quality control and look at it before it goes out. That's how you can stay fast and still be safe.
And here's a quick win or a bonus quick win that directly ties to our chat with Sean. I said it earlier. Start with internal tasks first. Use AI to help with your meeting summaries, your research, or your content drafts that only your team will see. Build your confidence with that and your understanding for using AI before you touch anything that's going to be customer or outward facing. Like we talk about this endlessly, but do it in a way that it doesn't matter if something goes wrong the first time around.
Yep. The winners won't be the ones chasing the flashiest tools. They'll be the ones using AI with intention. So guardrails don't slow you down. They give you the confidence to move faster, smarter, and safer. But I think it's a perfect segue into our wrap up. So let's bring this all together. Such a packed episode. These last 3 weeks talking with Sean, I think, have provided a lot of really practical frameworks and things for people to do. Let's recap the takeaways, because I think there's a lot to digest.
Yeah. So Sean's minimum viable AI policy, his MVAIP policy, it's not just theoretical. It's really essential. We cannot emphasize this enough. Having really clear guidelines about AI use protects your business and enables confident adoption. So it helps your team as well. It's protecting you, but it's also supporting your team, which is very important.
Yeah. And in some ways, we're really early days, but the businesses that thrive in this AI first world will be the ones that implement smart policies early. So start with low risk internal use cases, as Jess talked about, and always maintain that human oversight for critical operations.
Yeah. So don't forget, next week, we're going to be talking about our ChatGPT agent experiment. We're going to put these policies to the test and see if AI agents can actually help handle real business tasks without too much handholding. I'm very curious about what that's going to look like. I think if anything is going to enable mass adoption, it's going to be OpenAI and ChatGPT. Yeah. So very curious to see how this one plays out.
And we want to hear about your AI policy experiments too. So if you're starting to build those frameworks, if you're starting to test some of what Sean is talking about, please, share those with us. If you've implemented guardrails in your business and potentially saved a really big issue, please let us know. We'd love to kind of share that with this group so that we're all kind of learning together. Send us your stories at hello@earlyadopter.ai. Remember, no E in the adopter. And we'll be sure to feature them in a future episode.
And definitely check out Sean's website at breakthroughgrow.com. He's offering free 30-minute strategy sessions for early adopter listeners, which is so kind of him. Just make sure you mention the podcast when you reach out.
Yep. And before we go, huge thank you to our community. We're at early_adopter on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube. Whatever next one is popping up, we'll be there too, I'm sure. So follow us there for behind the scenes content and quick AI tips between episodes as well.
And please, if this episode helped clarify AI policies for your business, share it with another founder or another entrepreneur. We're all figuring this out together. And the more we share what works, the better we all get at making AI your unfair advantage.
And remember, you don't need to be a tech genius to use AI safely and effectively. You just need the right framework, smart guardrails, and maybe a willingness to start small, experiment, and learn as you go.
Thanks for listening to Early Adopter. Until next time, keep innovating and stay curious, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye, Jess.